There are things we only discover when we choose to silence our title and listen with our heart. Michele Carter thought she knew the restaurant that bore her last name inside and out. Everything seemed perfect: stellar reviews, satisfied customers, praise all over social media. But something was off, and it wasn't the seasoning. She went there undercover, without revealing who she was. She wanted to understand the wave of resignations and the drop in revenue. But she didn't expect to see what she saw, and what happened next unleashed an avalanche of truths. Do you really think you know the people around you? What if I told you that sometimes the biggest villains hide behind polite smiles and clean aprons? That true loyalty reveals itself in silence, behind the scenes? This isn't just another one of those rich owner playing employee stories. It's a real, raw, and emotional twist, one that might open your eyes to a lot in your own life. Because deep down, we've all felt betrayed where we least expected it. And what if I told you that a simple gesture changed the life of a forgotten man, exposed two opportunists, and reignited the purpose behind an entire business? Stick with me. This story has everything to show you that what's hidden eventually comes to light, and when justice arrives, it transforms everything around it. Michele Carter had always been the type to observe before taking action. While many restaurant owners are content with numbers on a page, she felt something wasn't right. How could the reviews for Carter's Diner be going up while the profits and the smiles of the employees were fading? The math didn't add up. And that's where one of the greatest leadership lessons comes in. Sometimes you have to take off the badge to see what only a tin of eyes can catch. Stories like this teach us that seeing from the outside is not the same as feeling from within. She decided to go undercover in her own restaurant. No fuss, no fancy makeup, and without the last name that commanded respect. Just Michele, a regular woman sitting at a table like any other customer. Her goal? To hear what no one would say in front of a boss. A strategy, by the way, that any leader could use, whether in a company, a team, or even a family. Sometimes, observing the environment unnoticed is the only way to understand the real stories that unfold when the masks come off. Over the days that followed, Michele discovered more than mispriced items or wrong orders. She noticed heavy silences, forced smiles, and eyes that avoided contact. It felt like watching a play where everyone was performing out of obligation, not passion. And as any attentive minner knows, pain doesn't come from nowhere. There's always something behind it. The question that kept echoing in her mind was, what was behind those tired faces? What stories were being suffocated between one order and the next? Amid so many empty expressions, one face caught Michele's attention: Henry, a dishwasher, already past 70, who never complained, never showed up late, and didn't seem to notice the exhaustion his body betrayed. While the younger one sighed with boredom, he smiled while rinsing pots. It seemed crazy, but there he was, a man who clearly carried deep stories, and yet remained steady, as if driven by a mission. And let's be honest, those who have suffered a lot are often stronger than they appear. Michele started a conversation, discreetly, and she discovered more than she expected. Henry had lost his wife to cancer. He sold his house, car, everything he had, just to try to extend the life of the woman he loved. Now, he lived in a rusty trailer, slept under leaks, and still helped co-workers whose names he barely knew. Those who know stories like his understand that dignity isn't about what you have, but how you live. Henry was a living reminder that there are good people fighting in silence, without asking for the spotlight. This kind of pain doesn't show up in spreadsheets or performance reports, but it screams in small gestures, like covering a customer's bill without saying a word or picking up someone else's trash without being asked. Michele felt the weight of truth. The restaurant that carried her last name had a hero in the back kitchen, invisible to the hurried eyes. And that's when she realized, if Henry was being ignored, who else was being misunderstood? How many other stories were being written between dirty dishes and tired glances? As Michele continued her silent mission, she witnessed something that tugged at her heart. Megan and Troy, two sharp-tongued cashiers with fake smiles, were laughing behind Henry's back. They mocked his generosity, said he was stupid for working so hard, and were even plotting something dirty. They would make it look like he was stealing money. Evil often hides behind clean uniforms and rehearsed greetings. And that's when you realize that some stories only reveal their darkest side when you start paying attention to the details. Seeing that hurt, Not just because it was unfair, but because Michele knew Henry couldn't handle another loss. He had already lost everything once. Watching cruel people try to destroy someone who could barely hold on was like seeing a candle being snuffed out by someone who never understood the value of light. And the most infuriating part? The manager, Patricia, had no idea. It was as if the whole system had turned its back on a man who only wanted to work in peace. Stories like this are more common than we think, in workplaces, in schools, even at home. But Michele wasn't the kind of person who saw injustice and stayed quiet. Not at all. She knew that changing a reality took more than good intentions. It took evidence, emotional intelligence, and strategy. And the first thing she understood was this. If she wanted to save Henry and restore the soul of Carter's diner, she needed to act with surgical precision. Because some stories, in order to be saved, need proof, not just words. Michele knew that accusing without evidence was like shouting into the wind. No one listens, and they still say you're overreacting. So, she decided to set a fair trap. She discreetly installed cameras and microphones in strategic spots around the restaurant. And as part of the plan, she enlisted the help of a single mother, a loyal customer, one of those who knows more about the restaurant than the menu itself. It was simple. She would pretend not to have enough money, and Michele would watch. Real stories require real actions, and she was about to write one. The result was as predictable as it was infuriating. Henry, with his usual kindness, covered part of the woman's bill without hesitation, using what little he had in his pocket. Meanwhile, Megan and Troy, true to their cruelty, tried to twist the facts and manipulate the manager once again. But this time, the stage was different. They didn't know that every gesture, every whisper, every intention had been recorded. And this is where it's proven. While many believe the truth takes time, it's actually just waiting for the right moment to be revealed. And stories like this prove it with power. Michele remained silent until the right moment. The kind of silence that isn't omission, but strategy. Because, you see, there are injustices that can only be fought with intelligence and preparation. And when you confront evil with planning, good doesn't just win, it teaches. It teaches that kindness is not weakness. It teaches that there are still people willing to fight for those who can't defend themselves. And most importantly, it teaches that some stories need to be brought into the light so they never again live in the shadows. The restaurant was full that day. Customers laughed, waiters rushed around, and Henry was about to be fired. Patricia, pressured by rumors and planted false evidence, was already walking toward him with that stern look of someone who believes they're doing the right thing. Michele observed everything, her heart heavy. But when Henry began to be accused, she stood up. And as every good mentor knows, there are moments in life when the truth can no longer wait. Stories of justice have their own timing, and hers had just arrived. With a firm gesture, Michele asked for silence. She stepped onto a small platform near the counter, removed the cap she had been using as a disguise, and revealed her identity. The room went still. Eyes met, whispers stopped, and without hesitation, she showed the footage. It was like watching a live movie. Megan and Troy, caught red-handed, were exposed right then and there. The police were called. And you know what's most beautiful? Watching dignity being restored to someone who just wanted to do their job. Because there are stories that cannot end in injustice. And this one certainly wouldn't. Henry cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. Those who mocked him were now in handcuffs. And the man who thought he was invisible had become the center of the scene. And honestly, is there anything more powerful than seeing good triumph in public? When a lie is undone in front of everyone, it never gets stitched back together the same way. Michele didn't just save Henry, she restored the entire team's trust. And like every great story, this moment became a turning point at Carter's diner. But something even bigger was yet to come. After the chaos came the rebirth. Michele didn't just apologize to Henry, she took action. She promoted him to floor manager, giving him the respect and authority he had always deserved. And she didn't stop there. She paid off all the medical debts left from his wife's treatment and, with tears in her eyes, handed him the keys to a new home. A real home, with a solid roof, a comfortable bed, and dignity in every corner. Stories like this are bomb in cynical times. They prove there are still leaders willing to change lives, not just spreadsheets. More than just rewarding a good man. Michele chose to transform the company's culture. She revamped internal policies, raised wages, and created emergency plans for employees in need. Carter's Diner, once just a beloved local restaurant, became a symbol of corporate empathy. And you, if you lead any team, whether employees or your own family, need to understand this. Good environments create good stories. And good stories build loyalty, love, and genuine gratitude. Inspired by Henry, Michele also created a fund in his name, dedicated to helping other employees in extreme situations. How? Voluntary donations, a portion of monthly profits, and direct support to those who need it most. A practical example that any company, no matter how small, can adapt. Helping an employee pay rent, offering therapy, ensuring transportation. These small gestures build legacies. Over time, Carter's Diner stopped being just a place to eat. It became a symbol. People no longer came just for the generous burgers or the famous apple pie. They came for the feeling they found there. It was like stepping into a space where respect, empathy, and dignity were on the menu. Michele remained present, not as a distant boss, but as someone who walked between tables, asked how her employee's day was going, and truly listened. Stories like this are powerful because they're born from transformation, not perfection. Henry kept working, but now it was by choice, not necessity. He was the first to arrive and the last to leave, not out of obligation, but because he enjoyed it. And it's funny how his co-workers' attitudes changed, from disdain to admiration, from snickers to respectful silence. Even the most distracted customers noticed. There's something different about this place. And there truly was. When values are restored, everything changes, from the service to the atmosphere. Stories of resilience, like Henry's, touch the heart because they're real, tangible, and inspiring. Today, Carter's Diner is being studied by other companies in the region. Michele gives lectures. Henry has become somewhat of a local celebrity, and the Solidarity Fund has already helped dozens of employees. All because someone decided not to ignore the signs and chose to listen to what the routine was saying between the lines. And look, the lesson is simple, yet powerful. If you take care of people, people will take care of your business. And when the right stories are honored, success becomes a consequence, not a goal. Now tell me, how many injustices have you let slide because you thought there was nothing you could do? How many stories like Henry's are happening right in front of you, silently waiting for someone brave enough to step in? This narrative isn't just about a diner. It's about values that are becoming rare: respect, empathy, true leadership. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you also believes the world needs more people like Michele, those who observe, feel, and act. So, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you keep ignoring the small signs? Or will you start looking around with more attention, more compassion? Maybe your next fair action could change someone's story. And if you ever doubt yourself, remember, you don't need a title to make an impact. You just need courage and awareness. That's what the world needs. People who aren't afraid to do what's right, even when no one's watching. Asterisk asterisk. If this video touched you in any way, drop a comment below. What would you do if you were in Michele's shoes? Let's exchange ideas, reflect together. And of course, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this content with someone who needs to understand the power of good leadership and the value of true stories. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we transform lives through them.